hard to choose. For your sport shows, updates, and interviews. The only way is the right way, I might say. Nobody doing it better, y'all some lightweights. Malik right, up all day and all night. Pushing all the buttons up to something till it's alright. He looking at it from all sides and angles. Got a stripes on his body like he played for the Bengals. Oh man, there's no one discussing it. They came, they stayed, they either did it or done it. Man, I love it, cause all they ever do is win. So kick back, relax, the TWSN.
Shout out Young Swish.
Guys, for tuning in to another episode of State of the Jungle with Malik Wright, presented by the Right Way Sports Network, aka TWSN. I'm your host, Malik Wright, joined by my co-hosts. As always, we've got Evan, we've got Logan, we've got Daniel, we've got Jimmy on the ones and twos, and we've got a jam-packed show. Before we jump into everything, do us a favor, give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, turn on post notifications so you guys don't miss when we go live or upload content from the TWSN studios. Boys, it's been a while. It's been a while. 2 weeks to be exact. Was in the Super Bowl, was at the Super Bowl down in New Orleans. It was nice, good time. And then came back here and got bit by the flu bug. So, was working my way back from there. Appreciate Daniel for passing it on. But we're happy to be back. It's funny, we got some comments on the YouTube channel. It was like, man, I thought you retired. I thought you stopped doing this because it's been so long since you guys did a video, but we are back. We are back. A lot of stuff happened. I know a lot of stuff happened because for a majority of them, Daniel and I were live on site when Trey Hendrickson, Joe Burrow, and all these different people were doing these interviews. Cool nod. There's a video, there's a picture actually of me and Joe Burrow behind Joe Burrow that CBS posted actually, which was pretty cool. But there was a lot of people in uproar. A lot of people was in uproar from some of the comments that were made, and we're going to undoubtedly dive into all of it, get into all of it. But I think the first thing I want to start off with is let's start off with Germaine Pratt. Germaine Pratt officially requested a trade. It shocked some people. Shouldn't have shocked a lot of people. Some people are happy. Some people are pissed. Some people made more of it than what it was. Let me just say this. I think for the Bengals, there have been a lot of times where they've held on to guys too long. And if it takes a guy who was clearly on his way out requesting a trade for the Bengals to feel like they need to make a change, I'm for it, to be quite honest with you. I'm absolutely for it. For me, I look at it and I say, Germaine Pratt had a good career in Cincinnati. Oh, yeah. He's had a lot of great moments. Being in that stadium, watching the Bengals take down the Raiders and ending the playoff drought on a playoff P interception, amazing to watch. Seeing the strip of Travis Kelce in a big moment, awesome to watch. There were a lot of great moments. Him and Logan Wilson were a good tandem. One could even say he may have played above expectations, right? Because remember, there was a point in time where we all thought he was out of here. Mm-hmm. He thought he was out of here. The linebacker market didn't shape out the way he wanted to. Found himself back in Cincinnati. It was clear, though. The reason he wanted out of Cincinnati is because he believed that he was an every down linebacker. He believed that he had so much more to offer an NFL team than what he was given as far as the opportunity goes. I honestly believe, that decision to re-sign Germaine Pratt may have stymied the growth and the opportunities of a guy like Akeem Davis-Gaither, to be quite honest with you. But that's a story for a different day. I think the overall discussion I want to have here is what is everyone's temperature on Germaine Pratt requesting a trade? I'm not shocked by this. I'm not going to lie and say I expected it to happen. I did expect something to happen with Germaine Pratt, but I didn't expect him to say, hey, I want to trade. This feels like the employee that you're about to get rid of saying, hey, you can't fire me. I want to trade. You just want to switch to a different store. That's what this feels like to me. We all knew it was coming. But let's talk about it. Evan, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think you kind of nailed it with saying, "Hey, I understand if you think it's time to move on." Like
Mhm.
you've definitely had some good moments, like you said in the playoffs, that are going to mean a lot to Bengals fans, and Bengals players too. I'm sure, man. And but the fact of the matter is, he had that really good year, what, almost 3 seasons ago now,
Yeah.
and every other year besides that has been a lot of inconsistency. Um, there are some of the good plays, right? That really they'll stand out to you, but then there's two or three other where he's shooting the wrong gap, he's out of position, it just looks slow. Um, and there's a lot to be said about what the defensive line in front of him looked like,
Mhm.
but also being top 20 in missed tackle percentage, like, and just repeatedly kind of being in that kind of speaks to being in that kind of bucket of like, yeah, you do see the high end plays, but you're not seeing enough consistency. And that's what you need from your veterans, especially when you transition from, hey, you're not going to pay guys like Jesse Bates. Okay, you are going to pay Logan Wilson, Germaine Pratt, Trey Hendrickson. Okay, this is going to be your defensive core. You need these guys to be captains of the defense. And it never really felt like him or Logan Wilson. I think Logan Wilson's maybe not necessarily like a vocal leader, but even leading by example, I didn't see the consistency there. And if you are kind of in that middle of the pack, I mean, he's really around 30 out of 50 linebackers in a lot of different key metrics. It's like, yeah, you're paying middle of the pack money for a guy who's kind of inconsistent and about a little bit below average. And it's like, if you want to get some fresh blood in there to try and get something new, to try and inject some athleticism into this linebacking core, I'm totally for that. Yeah, getting out on a guy who is going to be 29 this upcoming season has not really lived up to what you would expect from that contract year. I think it's definitely a move that I probably agree with, to try and inject some athleticism into that defense.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, the linebacker position is really kind of just becoming the young man's position on defense, just like it
Mhm.
is at running back. Obviously there's still some veterans that hang around and hang around and hang around. And it's unbelievable. Bobby Wagner's still kicking it. Levante David, like these
Right.
guys, like what they're doing is truly unbelievable. Like there's not too many linebackers. Again, just like running back, the shelf life of linebackers isn't very high compared to a lot of these other positions. So just when you have that common sense factor into this discussion, it just provides another point of why nobody should really be that surprised. I know requesting a trade kind of feels more and sounds more harsh, and like somebody's doing something wrong,
Mhm.
just but I don't think that's necessarily the case here. Like we've all said, everybody has kind of talked about him being a potential cut candidate. We all know he hasn't played the best last year. He had
Highest cap number of
like
his contract this year.
there's
Yeah.
more. There's just it sucks. But at the end of the day, there's just more things pointing to him
Mhm.
not being on the team than being on the team. And he's provided so many great moments for us. I don't want to act like he's not a good player or anything, because he has done so many great things for us and played at a high level and big moments plenty of times. But you know, I don't think anybody out there truly believes his best days are ahead of him, or that he's going to continue to play at an above average level. And that's fine. That not every player needs to be in their peak all the time.
Right.
But when it comes to Germaine Pratt and the linebacker position as a whole, we need to be quicker. You need to be more athletic. You need to just have more speed. And those are all things that he has never had. And he's made it work for a long time, which is another thing that's even rare for a linebacker of his ability and his, the way he's built and made up. Great player. But again, at the end of the day, the time was coming. It was either going to be cut, play the contract out, move on, just because he wants to kickstart things, maybe get a show he can do a little bit more on another team, get a contract a little bit earlier, whatever it is. He never was going to get that opportunity in Cincinnati. So
Mhm.
I think nobody should be remotely surprised about it. Again, it sounds harsher than it really is, but I promise it's not as drastic as it sounds.
Yeah, I think when I look at it, Germaine Pratt is, if we're talking about the next couple seasons, first off, he only has one more year on his contract. I think that this defense, and it shows that they're in for a new era, right? New defensive coordinator. And I think that with Al Golden's specialty, with linebackers, I think that this kind of signals a new era for what Al Golden and this defense wants, right? It's not like Golden's going to be here for 1 year. It's not like he's here for a 2-year stint. This is a long-term play. So I think that you have to set the groundwork for what you want. And maybe this, for me, this signals that Golden wants to go in a different direction. I don't necessarily know if he's confident in the free agents. I don't know if he's confident in the draft, but I'd be very confident at this point to say that they're going to bring in some new blood, whether that is, early in the draft. We saw them attack it a couple years ago with Akeem Davis-Gaither. So I think that this, for right or for wrong, if Germaine Pratt's not on the Bengals, you're freeing up $5 million to cap space, and you're hopefully going to get younger. And I think that that's the angle that the Cincinnati Bengals want. And I think the same thing for Germaine Pratt. You also want to be a starter, and you also want job security. So if you're not getting an extension, it might just be best to move on. And I think at this point, I don't necessarily know if I see him with the Bengals this upcoming season.
Yeah, and I think that, it's okay to, talk about it. Germaine Pratt, I don't know what the market out there looks like for him. I don't know if there is a market. One thing that's for sure, the Bengals can't overvalue their own players. And one thing I will say is, when we saw the Bengals about to move off of Joe Mixon, remember they were going to cut him. And a team like the Texans came swooping in saying, hey, we'll take him. And they traded him, So I think approaching it with the same type of mentality here, trying to get something in return. You talk about the money the money aspect of what they could get. There's a lot of players on the Bengals that they can, if they decide to move off of said players this offseason, they can really free up a lot of money, get themselves some more room to work with. And during the show, we're going to get through all of that. But before we continue this dialogue, do us a favor, give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications so you guys don't miss when we go live or upload content from the TWSN studios. But Germaine Pratt conversation is going to be one that's going to continue to be had until he is no longer a member of the Bengals. I do not know what a trade market looks like for him. I do know teams like the New England Patriots were interested in him coming out of the draft. They were interested in doing free agency. We'll see. Obviously, there's the link to Lou Anarumo. Does Lou Anarumo think that maybe, hey, it makes sense to bring a familiar face to Indy that I know, one of the real catalysts for our defense? I do find it funny, though, when you hear people in national media talk. And I see a lot of Bengals fans get worked up when they see this and they say, hey, why are they talking about Germaine Pratt as if he was some leader in Cincinnati? To be clear with you, Germaine Pratt was a leader in that locker room. He was viewed as a leader in that locker room. He was a vocalized leader in that locker room. I'm going to tell you where it took a turn a little bit. It took a turn when there was a game, might have been pretty big, against the Kansas City Chiefs in the playoffs, and Germaine Pratt was a little bit more passionate than maybe, some are even used to here in Cincinnati, especially towards the young player in Joseph Ossai. And some people thought he was maybe bullying or scolding Joseph Ossai to a degree, a little bit too harshly. And seeing the way national media, well, even more so local media, really pounced on him and hurt and went after him a little bit, and seeing how the fan base sort of went after him to a degree, it made him sort of not be as vocal. This is not hearsay. This is things that I was told. And it makes sense, right? It seemed like he always had a chip on his shoulder since then, and it wasn't still the same old Germaine Pratt that we were essentially used to. But that all being said, he was a leader here in Cincinnati. So when you hear people like Ian Rappaport, Tom Pelissero, or Mike Garafolo talk about what Cincinnati could be losing from a leadership standpoint in Germaine Pratt, they're 100% accurate. Why Joe Mixon is brought up in this discussion, I have no idea. But I do think when it comes to Cincinnati players, your name holds more weight once you're off the Bengals than when you're actually on the Bengals. And what I mean by that is you somehow get national respect. The Bengals moving off of said players is egregious if you have a name to a degree, right? It's looked at as the Bengals fumbled it for whatever reason. These are the same people that do not pay attention to the Bengals. I'm going to be very, very clear. A lot of these guys get a script, they jump on TV, and they regurgitate information based off of notes. Mm-hmm. It's like if you put me on a show and you said, Malik, talk about baseball. I could bullshit my way through it, for sure. I could tell you why the Reds might go to the playoffs this year and might break through. Sure, I could do that. But am I an expert? No. It's the reason why you guys tune into shows like State of the Jungle. It's the reason why you tune into James Rapine show, like Entered into the Jungle. It's the reason why you tune into Joe Goodberry show or Dave Lapham show or what else, because these are people that you view who have an understanding of how the team operates. So I want to save you a lot of pain. Trust me, this is me talking to you as a Bengals fan growing up. You realize not a lot of people fully understand how Cincinnati works. Not a lot of people understand the intricacies of how the Cincinnati Bengals work on a regular basis from a roster construction standpoint to who the key players are outside of Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and Tee Higgins, because those are the names that you hear. There are a lot of players that are good on this team. There are a lot of players that fall under the radar. Don't be so frustrated when you hear jackasses like Chris, what's his name? Chris Canty? Jump on television and they tell you Joe Burrow is an elite. It's because they realize, and I've said this before, the Bengals fan base is one of the most passionate fan bases, and they follow this team to the end. So they know if they regurgitate, hey, Bengals information, they know the Bengals fan base will flock to that. They will follow that. So save yourself a lot of stress this offseason. When you hear national media, Stephen A. Smith and all these different people talk about Joe Burrow or they talk about the Bengals, understand it is a slow news cycle. These are the same people that were just talking about Patrick Mahomes' haircut, right? That is what was on television. So do not get so worked up when you hear people talk about the Bengals or what the Bengals aren't doing or Joe Burrow's going to request a trade. It is their job to drive narratives. It is their job to spin narratives, to have something to talk about because they're on television 24/7. So again, don't get so worked up when you hear national media spewing shit, because guess what? To be completely truthfully told, you talk to some of these people, you have conversations with some people, and they say a lot of these takes they don't even really factually believe.
Yeah.
But it's about, hey, what's going to get people up in arms? What clip can go viral? That's how it is nowadays. So that all being said, Germaine Pratt, we appreciate all your efforts here in Cincinnati. You were a very good linebacker for us. We had a lot of good moments. I believe that it could run its course, and I think that he could still go somewhere else and have some success. He's 28 years old. But I actually want to touch on something really quickly. My good friend Evan McPhillips here, who happens to also be my co-host, he said something a couple of weeks back that kind of perked my ears up. He talked about a linebacker from the San Francisco 49ers who is entering into free agency. He's one of the better linebackers, I think, in the National Football League. Obviously, he's battling back from an Achilles injury and all this good stuff. So maybe he didn't put up the same gaudy numbers. But when I look at this guy, man, when I look at Dre Greenlaw, I say Dre Greenlaw is a guy that I could view as a perfect replacement for Germaine Pratt. The one thing about that's really, really cool about Logan Wilson can play every linebacker spot that you ask of him. I do not believe Akeem Davis-Gaither will find himself back here in Cincinnati. I don't expect him to be back here in Cincinnati. The linebacker unit will look different. I do expect us to potentially add another young piece at the linebacker spot, because I do expect Al Golden to have 3 traditional linebackers on the field quite a little more often than what Luan Romo had. I do believe that's what's going to be the case. That all being said, what does that look like? I do not know, but I think Dre Greenlaw is a perfect place to start. Evan, I want to let you touch on him a little bit more, though.
Yeah, coming off the injury, I think you're going to get a discount for him than what you would expect. And he's 27 right now, going to be 28. But was a big part of San Francisco's kind of front seven there, and didn't get necessarily all the credit in the world with Fred Warner being back there and garnering so much praise and being so impressive. But Dre Greenlaw was definitely really impressive on his own right. The consistency is really what stands out. Every single year he graded over a 65, except for one in 7 years, going on 7 years. So that's really impressive. That's one thing that you lacked from Germaine Pratt, was that level of consistency. Quality coverage player. Just that was Germaine Pratt was kind of trending the wrong way in coverage. Yeah, he had the 2 interceptions the last couple of seasons, but in terms of his overall passer rating, the yards after catch allowed, the overall yards allowed in coverage, and again, the defense overall had its struggles. So I don't want to say Germaine Pratt was the problem, but I do think there is opportunity to get more athletic there, get a little bit more of a coverage guy, a guy who can get sideline to sideline and add a little bit more athleticism. I think that's something that Dre Greenlaw could definitely help to produce a little bit. And like I said, man, just the consistency effort, like that's the big factor for me. Like I will take guys who are above average every single week in, week out on the plays that matter and the plays that don't, versus, the guys who are just going to be, yeah, you can get the high end plays on, 2nd and 8 or, 1st and 10, and that sets you up really nice. But if you're lost or, doing the wrong things on a lot of the 3rd and shorts, especially in the goal area, like that can really hurt you. So like being able to be that consistent, not only as a run defender, but in coverage, I think that's really great. And then just a much better, just overall tackler in terms of missed tackles. Had 2 years of 10% or more. Everything else was 7% or lower. And that was just something that Germaine Pratt could not say. Had almost every single career year 10% or higher. So you're getting better, you're getting more athletic, you're getting better in coverage, you're getting better tackling, you're just getting more consistent down to down. And I think that's really, really valuable, especially when you just need more average level play from this defense to compensate while the offense kind of helps carry the weight a little bit.
Logan, you got anything else you want to add to that?
I mean, just in general, not specifically about Drake Greenlaw, but just the replacing, the kind of the new faces that are going to be getting in the linebacker room. I don't want, we've talked a lot about, offensive line and how the guards, and I've been very vocal about how it's just easy to upgrade there. I don't say linebackers just going to be easy to upgrade, but it's easy to it's going to be very easy to find linebackers that are playing in today's game that match what we need, that, you're going to get on a bargain that are going to play a lot. Like there's so many different ways you can play the linebacker position. There's so many different styles. There's so many different just preferences. Al Golden likes to do a lot of different things with his linebackers. I'm sure we'll add another stereotypical linebacker, and then we'll add more of a pass coverage guy, then more of a pass rushing guy. Like it's going to be a very unique linebacker room. And it's, like they've alluded to, it's going to look very different. I'm pretty excited to see how that room turns out. Because, Germaine Pratt and Logan Wilson were fun. It was a fun duo. So, they are very aware of how important that position is. And Al Golden, obviously the former linebackers coach, is very aware of how important the position is again. So I think it's going to be a position that they address in a bunch of different ways, but they're going to take very seriously because, again, Al Golden, former linebacker coach, he is going to be very adamant about adding quality ones that he really likes, ones that he will really pound the table for, which is going to be exciting whenever we do, kind of start to add linebackers.
I agree.
Yeah, I think
you're ready to go.
No. I'm just excited for to see how this linebacker room works. And I think that you guys hit the nail on the head with Dre Greenlaw, because when you look at the rest of these guys, I mean, in free agency, Zach Bond's the other name, but I think that this dude's going to be a lot more overpaid. He looked absurd this season, but is he going to be the guy that you're saying, hey, I'm going to pay him worth more than what Dre Greenlaw would get? And I think that Dre Greenlaw, when you look at the rest of these guys, I'm of the camp that I want somebody that's an improvement on the coverage side of things over a Germaine Pratt. I think Germaine Pratt gave some good things in the run game, but for me, when I'm looking at who I want to be the tag team partner for Logan Wilson, I want somebody who's going to be great in coverage. And when you look at the rest of these guys, it's really Dre Greenlaw's above the rest of these guys, because you got Levante David, you got Eric Kendricks. These guys are all older guys. So I think that when you look at the replacement, it really is, you got to go out there, go get a top tier guy like Dre Greenlaw, or you better go out there and spend premium draft capital for a linebacker. And I think that that's a conversation we could have, right? Whether it's round 2 or round 3, we could look to have the Bengals, attack that position group. But all in all, I think you have to leave free agency. If Germaine Pratt is no longer on the team, you have to leave free agency with somebody. And I think that it would be better to spend at the top of the market, linebacker market. You're not spending 10, 15, $20 million a year on Dre Greenlaw. So I definitely really like the name Dre Greenlaw. I'm a fan of it.
For sure, man. For sure. There's going to be more talk, obviously, when it comes to the linebacker position. We've got some more topics that we want to get to, obviously, today. But before we jump to those, give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications so you guys don't miss when we go live or upload content. I'm going to get to some of your questions, too, so make sure you guys drop questions down in the comment section. I see somebody asking about Camp Sample. Here's what I'll say is, anytime you get a new leader at a, especially from a defensive side of things, guys that are free agents are always up in the air. You don't know. Maybe they're looking for greener pastures. Maybe looking to try something else out. Because you got to realize the players also have a decision to make as well for themselves, right? Yeah, the coaches that you knew, maybe the coaches you loved, are no longer here. So do you want to continue with this coaching staff? I know some of these players were here when Al Golden was here, but do they want to continue on the path of potentially trying to win a championship at Cincinnati, or maybe they want to move somewhere else? So it's going to be obviously an ever-changing conversation that happens with guys like Cam Sample. I don't even think those conversations are even had yet, especially with him coming off of an injury. I don't view him as a priority really for the Bengals. I do expect this to look completely different. I do expect this defensive line to look completely different. And something that I think we should really talk about, which we will talk about, is some of the cap savings for some moving off of some of these guys, which we will get to as well. But let's talk about the next news. Tee Higgins, right? James Rapien reported it. Tom Pelissero, I think, confirmed it afterwards that, or was it Jeremy Fowler? One of the others. I'm not exactly sure. I think that have been Jeremy Fowler. That essentially the Bengals are looking to sign Tee Higgins long term. Shocker to no one, right? And if they couldn't get a deal done, they're going to use the franchise tag on him. And this is what me and at least Jesse were talking about during Super Bowl Radio Row. And we were pretty much having the dialogue of what does that look like for the Bengals? And now the Bengals got the news today, along with many other clubs, that the cap space is going up significantly, right? Shocker. Yeah. So the Bengals are definitely extending a guy like Tee Higgins is not out of the realm of possibility. Is something that should be in the cards, especially if you're going to use the franchise tag, if you can't deal with a long-term deal. But let's be clear. All signs to Tee Higgins wanting to be here in Cincinnati were very, very clear. He left Dave Mulgeta, right? He signs over with Jamar Chase's agent. It's very clear that both of these deals, right? The Jamar Chase Tee Higgins deal, it still wouldn't shock me. Both of these things happened on a very similar timeline. The cool thing about them both having the same agent and representing the Cincinnati Bengals is they can structure the deal in which they'll know, well, the agent will know exactly what Tee Higgins is making, exactly what Jamar Chase is making. How can we do it to where it's friendly towards our guys, right? But also it helps the Bengals while structuring these deals. I've always been of the belief, guys, that the Bengals need to change their philosophy. I think a lot of the nuances that come with trying to work on a long-term extension with these guys, the Bengals are competitive when it comes to their offer for guys. They're competitive, but a lot of these guys want stability. A lot of these guys want to make sure for a fact that, hey, will I have stability? Will I have security, financial security beyond just year one? So, like, we were talking about it even on one of the videos we did the other day. The Bengals might say, hey, we'll come to you with this deal. And the deal is very similar to what maybe the Lions are offering you. But the Bengals will say, hey, you know what? We'll front load the deal. We'll pay you at all year one. Here's the catch. We won't cut you. You'll see the life of the deal, but there's no real serious guarantees beyond year one. So for you as a player, you're like, hell yeah, I'll take that deal. You're giving me that money all up front. Yeah. And it sounds good, right? You get all that cash up front. You're like, great, I'm happy. And then you look at it and it's like, after year one, oh shit, I'm not really, like, there's no guarantee. So if I get hurt, like there's nothing guaranteeing me that past that. And so if the Bengals want to take it to the next step, the next level, I think changing the way we do contracts, changing the way that they do contracts on a regular basis is what's going to get the Bengals, in a different ballpark. And I get it. I respect them. I respect them because they don't find themselves in cap hell. They don't find themselves walking up to their players and saying, hey, I need you to take a pay cut in order to make sure we structure them. But let me be very, very clear to you. Your quarterback, your franchise quarterback, just signed a new deal just last year. I think it was last year. Just last year. Why is he even uttering the words restructure? Why is he even talking about the words restructure? When you look at the roster, outside of guys like Orlando Brown, Joe Burrow, who are you paying? Who are you paying? Who are you committing serious dollars to? Why is this even a discussion? Guys, the Bengals can cut Sam Hubbard right now, save $8 million. The Bengals can cut Alex Kappa right now, save $8 million. The Bengals can cut Sheldon Rankins and save $9.6 million. You do that. We're not even talking about other guys, potential guys, cap cuts, guys like Zach Moss. What happens there, we don't know. The Bengals can get upwards to $80+ million before we even start talking about a Joe Burrow restructuring.
Yeah.
That shouldn't even be up for discussion right now, the way I see it. They have the money, they have the capabilities to get this stuff done. We mapped it out the other night. Well, if you're really looking at this, the Bengals respectfully can go into free agency, right? We know that there's certain positions they're gonna target. The Bengals can get upgrades at the guard spots, both positions. They can do those things easily. I don't know. I got more of that I want to say, but I want to get everyone's thoughts, if there are any thoughts, or if we want to move on over to the third topic, which is the pressure that they're feeling in turn. Does anybody have any other thoughts that don't align with mine's when it comes to Tee Higgins franchise tag thing? I just, one thing I'll say is franchise tag with the intent to sign long term. Don't waste it. Don't waste it. But
I agree with that. The one point I wanted to make on the note that the cap was a lot higher, it's important that he didn't get to the free agent market because especially with the wide receiver class being right now.
Yes.
You remember back when the NBA signed the new TV deal and they had the really mid free agent class, but like everybody was getting paid out there because you just had to meet the cap floor, right? You had to spend up to the cap floor. So there were bad players out there getting paid like top 10, top 15 money. And even NFL contract guys were looking over like, God damn, look at those guys getting 5 years, $130 million, and they're not doing anything, right? So yeah, I think it's good because I think there is like a lot of teams out there that desperately would like a wide receiver, don't want to take a chance on a Stephon Diggs, Amari Cooper, Chris Godwin, all getting closer over 30 injuries. It's really not much else besides Tee Higgins. So I could definitely see someone willing to overpay him just to get him in the door and see what happens.
Sorry to cut you off.
Yeah.
And our guy Sean Brennan, you're in the comment section, brother. How about those Chiefs? It was a good game. Sorry, I'm petty.
No, you're good.
Yeah,
I was just gonna say
Sorry. No. So we're going. You're good.
I was just gonna say to your point, 5 out of the top 10 cap hits on the team this upcoming season can be cut for upwards of $50 million in savings on top of the cap increase.
And can we dive a little deeper into this as well? If you sign Jamar Chase long term, he still has the 5th-year option. That contract is not even kicking in for a year. So when we talk about
Trey Henderson
still has a year on his deal. Like we're talking about these guys as if they're pending free agents. The only true pending free agent that you have to sign to a big money deal is a Tee Higgins, and he's not even
anymore.
He's a franchise tag guy, right?
So he's locked in.
So he's locked in. So you look at those guys. So maybe Mike Gesicki we're talking about here. I don't think people really have a true understanding of how the cap actually works and how spending works.
It's the whole cap versus cash conversation,
Yeah.
right? And the Bengals don't like to spend up to the cap. And that's always the infuriating thing when they're like, oh, hey, we're not going to spend the last $15-20 million of the cap. And people are like, what the hell? Why not? And they're like, well, we're saving that for this and that. We can roll it over. And
I think that's just the most frustrating part about it is just seeing all these teams be so flexible, be so creative, and just, I might have been Goodberry. He posted just about how the Bengals are paying 3 people and it's their 50 million cap. The Eagles are paying 7 or whatever it is. And it's just like, there's just so many different things, ways to work.
While we just brought up the Eagles and because of the Super Bowl and because we haven't had a show in a couple weeks, like I need to reiterate that yes, the Bengals absolutely have space to get Tee Higgins and Jamar Chase and everything is fine. And yes, I hate that we use AJ Brown and Devontae Smith as the example because people will go, oh, well, AJ Brown's getting $32 million a year. But if you look at the contract, it's 4 years, then like 5 void years. And then there's a like $58 million cap hit in the age 30 season, 5 years down the road. And so like the cap hits right now are like 11 million, 14 million, 18 million.
There's just a thing to say. There's
right. But that's the thing is, but like we take the number and run with it because the agent reports it like, hey, it's 32 million a year. Isn't that great? We broke 30 million. But in actuality, it's not really close to 30 million. It's closer to 27 or 28 million because you look at it and it's like, oh yeah, 58 million brings the average up to the contract, but you're never going to see that $58 million cap hit year. They're going to cut you before you ever get that, which is why AJ Brown, Tyreek Hill, who was another guy who had void years with another contract like that to get to 30 million with funny money because he wanted to be 30 million. Well, there you go. That's how you get to 30 million APY to say you're the highest paid.
but it's not really a true 30 million. Justin Jefferson, that was the true 30 million, right? Like Jamar Chase, that'll be true 30 million. Like a lot of those guys there like had it named, but it was because of things like that $58 million cap hit that happens in age 30 season 5 years down the road, right? Like, so yes, they can be paid. Yes, it can be done. I just hate that we point to that because like the Eagles contract of 10 years with 4 void years and a $58 million cap hit in 5 years down the road that you'll never see is just, it's so unorthodox. If half of the league or if 20 teams or 25 teams were all doing it, then I'd be like, come on, Bengals, like you should be doing it. But the fact is there's 2, 3 teams, 4 teams that do it, like the Dolphins, the Chargers, the Rams, the Saints, the Eagles, and it worked out for the Eagles. But for the Rams, they had to literally dismantle their entire defense one year because they were so capped out.
Won a Super Bowl though, so it worked.
They did with Aaron Donald and everybody else, and they hit on like 8 mid-round picks and everything worked out really well. And they had a great trade with Matthew Stafford, right? It worked out. But yeah, for the Saints, clearly didn't work out. You're capped out. You're paying a bunch of 30-year-old guys $20-30 million a year. Dolphins, same thing, paying a whole bunch of guys who are 30 plus million a year. Same thing with the Chargers. You had to cut Keenan Allen. Now Khalil Mack's out. You had 30 plus mil cap hits for a bunch of guys who were injured and approaching 30. Like that's the other aspect of when you do this kind of cap stuff and cap magic, because eventually that cap hit does come due and you can't always get out from under it. It's just, again, if more teams were doing it that way, I'd be like, hey, yeah, Bengals, you can do it versus AJ Brown. But like it's 2 or 3, 4 teams and like they're not even all doing it effectively necessarily. So like the Eagles are just very unique and we can appreciate it without saying like every team should necessarily aspire to it, right? Like it's just a very unique way they have of operating.
Because very soon you got to realize too, I think when people talk about it, they got to realize, you know, they have contracts that are kicking in, right? That will be kicking in. That's why, you know, if they had this magical way to manipulate the cap and make it work, Milton Williams wouldn't sniff free agency.
Well, they were going to have a problem at corner before they hit on two
guys
that just fell in their lap that both landed perfectly. You couldn't predict that going into the draft, but they were having that problem with Darius Slay. They did the void years and they were about to have to play, and Bradbury, they were about to pay them $14 million to not even be on the team because they were having a cap hit because of the void years. But then they ended up working out a deal with him and they were able to spread that out with a couple more void years and do everything. But like they were about to suffer those consequences. And then they lucked into getting that contract worked out with him and moving that around. And that was smart. But then you lucked into nailing 2 early round picks with corner too. And that saves you from having egg on your face and looking dumb. And then you look smart. But they were still about to feel the crunch because you can't, you can kick the can down the road, but you can't get out from under it.
I just want to, and before Daniel gets in here, I just want to credit Howie Roseman for a second.
He deserves credit
for it. This is a guy
it.
that like literally was banished. Right? He was demoted. He worked his way back, and then I'm pretty sure you saw the conversation, the question I asked him, and he was very gracious with his time and stuff.
Oh no, that was really cool.
He was awesome.
That was a cool video.
I just think it's really, really awesome to see awesome things happen to good people and people that really, really worked themselves up from the ground up again to rebuild and do it the correct way. It was great to see them. They're for me, the first time when they won the Super Bowl was like, I was working in Philly around the time actually, and they were acting crazy, but to see them actually conquer that and win that championship, I was very, very happy for them to see that. So Daniel, go ahead.
No, yeah. And I think even on that note, I remember like I have friends that are Eagles fans, and it's like you remember the Nelson Aguilar draft, the Jalen Reagor draft, the Jordan Matthews draft. Like and this goes to the same point about the Eagles and these other teams. You have to hit on your draft picks. And a lot of these teams that are successful have very capable players that are key contributors that are on their rookie contract. And you could even point to your own Cincinnati Bengals and say, hey, the Super Bowl run was in large part because you had guys on the rookie contract. So I think that the Howie Roseman example is a perfect, obviously free agency. They got Saquon Barkley, but it really comes down to the draft and the key contributors that they got. And like I said, the Howie Roseman, I think, is a perfect example because he was banished. Everybody hated him. They missed on many picks. And then you look at this run that they've been on, you look at 8, 9, 10 guys that they've got on this current roster right now that are extremely huge contributors on the rookie contract. So, and I think that this is another huge thing for the Bengals. Hey, the fact that you still have Miles Murphy, you still have Dax Hill, I'm really looking at Al Golden and say, hey, what can you do with those guys? Because they're still on their rookie contracts. How can you get those key contributors out of those guys? And I think that's your pathway to building, long-term successes. You have to have guys that contribute on the rookie contract.
I do want to just point out real
Yeah,
quick
sure.
and clarify something. I saw Sample said, I completely disagree with the sentiment that most teams fail at kicking the can down the road. I didn't mean to imply that teams fail to kick the can down the road. It's just eventually your chickens come home to roost, right? Like eventually you do have to pay the bill, right? Like the Saints right now, when they have no coach that wants to interview with them that's halfway serious because of how bad their cap situation is and because of how bad their team structure is right now, that's Saints have been kicking that can down the road. Yeah, they've been doing it successfully, but now eventually you have to pay the bill. The Rams, they lucked out hitting on 12 picks between round 3 and 7, and that got them through a year where they had to strip their defense down of everyone to the point where you literally could not name anybody not named Aaron Donald on that defense starting on week 1. Like, so yeah, they succeeded. They found a way to do it with one of the greatest defensive players of our modern era. Yeah, but they still had to completely dismantle their defense to get there. Like the idea is, yes, they can kick the can down the road, but eventually you do have to pay off that bill. You do have to have that year where you eat the Russell Wilson cap hit, right? Or you eat the Trey Waynes cap hit, however that works out. So that wasn't to say that teams can't do it. That's just that, you can only stave off the decline for so long before you do have to just tear things down to the studs and then rebuild it.
He responded as well. He said that the bill is less cap percentage if you kick the can down the road.
The idea is that then you're paying someone who's not going to be on your team, or you're paying someone way over their value. So if you kick that can down the road, then you're paying, let's say, 31-year-old AJ Brown $58 million against the cap, where you might be paying him $20 million in real cash, but then you have $58 million that you can't spend on anybody else in your team because AJ Brown is accounting against your cap. And that's the problem. So like it's more that, you can spread the money out. Yes, with longer contracts, you can adjust the cap hits and you can play with the guaranteed money, but eventually that does have to hit your books. So you can get creative with it. But at some point, like, it's either going to be evened out or it's going to be small some years and giant some years. But eventually you do have to pay what you owe. And the Von Miller contract is another great example for the Bills that has void years and a bunch of money backloaded. And so it's, you can survive that way. Yeah. But you don't just get out from that financial obligation.
Yeah. Want to get to our next topic before we do. Make sure you guys give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications so you guys don't miss when we go live or upload content. I want to jump into the internal pressure as well as the outside pressure, right, to get this thing correct. There's been a lot of that lately, whether it be a guy like Joe Burrow jumping on various shows, talking about how he wants to keep guys together and all this kind of stuff like that. I think it's a really cool thing, right? Because I think that it's the one offseason where you can't be like, well, you're just relying strictly on outside media. You're getting pressure legitimately from your leader. Joe Burrow, I think he realized this now. You think about it. Hey, I have more power than I realize, right? It's not like it's the Palmer days and all that kind of stuff like that. You actually did take this team to a Super Bowl with a lackluster offensive line. This is, I will say that if I can compare the Joe Burrow impact to any player in the sports world, I hope I'm not selling him short here when I say this, but I think his impact in Cincinnati and Ohio is very similar to what Luka's might have been with Dallas Mavericks, or was with the Dallas Mavericks, right? So they wanted to see the Mavericks organization do right by Luka Doncic, right? And I think that Bengals fans alike are wanting to see the Bengals organization do right by Joe Burrow. And they're saying, hey, you know what? Joe's speaking out, right? And you felt like it was this weird cluster where people felt like they couldn't criticize or say what they wanted to say. But when Joe Burrow said it, everybody speaks out in droves now. And now you got guys like Trey Hendrickson who, talked about the communication aspect, or the lack of it, if you will, on the Pat McAfee show, and how he came to, hear from Duke Tobin's comments made at the Senior Bowl. It's one of those things where it's not like it's the early 2000s anymore, the mid 2000s anymore. Social media is very alive and well, right? There are so many different shows out there. Guys have to answer some tough questions at times, and the organization is going to be hit with some of those tough questions. If you got Joe Burrow doing a media tour, and I'll be honest with you, seeing the guy walking around Radio Row, he looked miserable doing it. If you've heard the stories about Joe Burrow hating media, all that stuff is real. The fact of the matter is, Joe Burrow's coming out saying, hey, we need to keep these guys. Hey, we need to make sure that we're doing everything in our power to make sure we keep our star players. And I think that there's something to be said about the Bengals keeping players that actually want to be here. Hearing Trey Hendrickson come out and say, hey, I want to help Cincinnati win a championship, whether that means you trade me and you get draft capital or we agree to an extension. I want to see Cincinnati win a championship. Those are guys that you want to see here. Like Jesse Bates was one of those guys, right? Obviously, you couldn't work with his agent Dave Mulgeta because it was just a rough negotiation all around, and burnt bridges might have happened there. But when you look at it, man, it really comes down to the Bengals got to do a better job of making sure that they keep the players that want to be here in stripes. Not only that, but the players that are actually performing at a high level. And I think that's the conversation. I think that's what couldn't get lost in some things. So those are my thoughts. But I want to talk about the internal pressure. I want to talk about the push to keep guys, the push to build a competitive and championship level roster. Daniel, let's start with you.
I think that this is a huge off season for the Bengals. And I think a lot of it has to do with this is a huge part of your window, because when you look at the actual cap, like we talked about, Jamar Chase isn't getting paid a shit ton of money this offseason. Tee Higgins, even for his franchise tag, isn't getting paid, a $30 million tag. Same thing with, Joe Burrow, is that it's such a huge part of your franchise building that, in my opinion, you have to go out there and you have to sign these guys. And I think that this is the offseason where you could really mess things up, if we're being honest, right? You look at the past two off seasons, and the free agency misses this past offseason came back to bite the team in the ass. But you have to look 1 year in advance, 2 years in advance. And like I said, I think that this is such a huge part of the franchise that we were even talking before this offseason, where, hey, there was a chance that we were saying, should Zach Taylor be fired, right? You didn't make the playoffs, with Joe Burrow having one of the best seasons we've ever seen from a quarterback. Same thing with Jamar Chase. You're in this window that is so prime for a franchise, and the NFL is different than other sports. The NFL really is short windows at times. It is very rare that we see teams like the New England Patriots or teams like the Kansas City Chiefs continuously make it to the AFC Championship, continuously make it. And the Bengals have a chance to do that now. So I hope that they feel the pressure, and it really comes down to just retaining what you have right now. I don't think that anybody's asking for them to go out and trade for Myles Garrett. I don't think anybody's asking for them to go out and trade up in the first round, or make a massive move. It really is just plug some of these holes, right? The interior offensive line, plug some of the holes, maybe go out there and spend on the interior defensive line. But what is being asked of the Cincinnati Bengals team is not anything that's out of the realm of possibility. You're not asking, like these other teams, can you trade for a franchise quarterback? You have a franchise quarterback, you have a star wide receiver, and you have a roster that has a base that you can work with. So I hope that they feel the pressure, and on the Tee Higgins front too. Tee Higgins should not, and I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think that he would play on the franchise tag for back-to-back seasons. So I just look at it, and I think that this team has some questions to be answered. I think that Tee Higgins is the number one question, because Trey Hendrickson, we can talk about it, but Tee Higgins is the number one question. Do you re-sign him long-term and then go on from there?
So I think in general, I don't think the internal pressure can get much higher. I think everybody, I don't want to say they're about to all lose their jobs, because we know that's not necessarily the case, but a lot of people, if things go south, will not be there. And then the following year, and, go to the Super Bowl, go to the AFC Championship game, injuries. We cut him some slack with the injury with Joe, missed the playoffs. Okay. There's some reasonable expectations of why we missed the playoffs. It's a clear, this is what happened. This is why we didn't make the playoffs. Maybe we could have snuck in, whatever. But then you go into this year, and, it was one of the most unique years ever. You have a dominant offense. You have the youngest Triple Crown winner ever. You have a quarterback playing out of his mind. You just have an offense scoring a shit ton of points. You have one of the worst defenses in the league, one of the worst defenses ever, but you also somehow have the sack leader at the same time. It was just such a unique year. And it's very hard to kind of look at it and be like, man, we just sucked for whatever reason. Nothing was right. And that's not a feeling you could have. And that's one of the most dangerous positions to be in, is like, we don't necessarily know why these things didn't work. We don't really know why these players didn't work. We don't really know why we kept losing games, but we just kept losing games. So just that alone, it applies so much pressure when you don't have the obvious answers. And now you got to try to figure them out yourself. And how are we going to fix that? Maybe you're fixing the completely wrong thing. That's really not winning the game. Maybe Zach Taylor is the reason. Not saying he is, but I'm just saying maybe they look at the roster when in reality it's the coach. They look at the coach when it's the roster, vice versa, all those things. When there's no clear answer, things get dangerous. And that's why I think the pressure is so high, because again, the defense was terrible, but you have somebody who was the best defensive player in the league last year.
Mhm.
You have an offense that was so great, but still couldn't be good enough to win games somehow. So when you have all these things going for you and there's no obvious pathway to get back to the Super Bowl, to get back to these things that you want to be, that's where it gets scary. That's where the pressure is going to build from yourself. It's already building in the media. It's already building with the players. But now when you're looking at your product that you have, and it's like, man, do we do this? Do we do that? You start to second guess. You start to overthink. You start to question. You start to do these things. And that's kind of how you know the pressure is building internally, even through the draft process. We don't know what they're going to do in the first round. We don't know how they're going to attack free agency. We don't know. And I think that is just a clear signal that you can kind of feel the pressure within the building.
Yeah, man. I think you guys have pretty much said it all. The internal pressure is all that's left. You've gotten rid of everybody else, right?
Yeah.
There's no one else left to blame if things don't work out, because it's clearly not Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, right? It's clearly not Trey Hendrickson, right? So that there's only the coaching staff and the front office, and you can't blame the coaching staff necessarily for all the draft misses. Yeah, there's been struggles to develop talent, but there's also been some poor draft picks along the way, and I don't think the coaching staff owns all of that responsibility. I think that there needs to be some serious changes to coaching staff and front office, particularly with approach and evaluation, and also valuation. Not just how good is somebody, but how do we value these positions in the modern NFL? How do we invest in the modern NFL in terms of contracts? Because we know they're willing to pay things like quarterback, tackle, wide receiver, right? Do they need to adjust how they approach contracts? We think yes. Like, these are all, every bit of this process needs to be reevaluated, because you can't continue to cling to an old school approach in a world that is so rapidly changing in so many ways, especially the NFL contract structure, everything that's happening right now with technology and all the different financial mechanisms that are out there now for maneuvering contracts. They have a lot of tools at the disposal. And as much as they love their ham radio, you've got iPhones, and you got a bunch of different technology now that you can use, and it's time to learn how to use all these tools, because they can make your life a lot better.
There's definitely going to be some conversations that need to be had. I think that we see some comments in the comment section. Our guy Sean Brennan, he says the Bengals won't be a competitive team. We saw last year. Unless they were to trade Jamar Chase or Tee Higgins. I disagree with that. And I think part of that is, I think does anybody else feel like the league wants the Bengals to
They absolutely do.
Like get rid of their talented players or not be players anymore? Because I certainly get that. You never hear any write-ups or of anyone talking about why it could work.
Yeah.
Right. You always hear people talk about why it won't work and why it can't work and yada, yada, yada. So I don't know. I just think that the dialogue is very, very interesting here, but it's going to be a long off season. A lot of things to get into. I guess I'll update everyone. We were at the Super Bowl about at this point now, 2 weeks ago or a week and a half ago. We will be back in Indy for the NFL Combine. I leave Saturday for State of the Jungle next week. We'll be live from Indianapolis, as we do year in, year out. We'll be talking about different prospects and going forward. We have a lot of awesome content planned for this upcoming offseason. If you guys have followed our content, you know that the draft, that the offseason is where we come alive. We just debuted
The draft is where we come alive.
Sorry, I was funny laughing at Tanner Bush's comment. He said every time Malik starts smiling at these dumbass comments, I got me dead. I see a lot of stuff, man. You'd be surprised, man. But me and the guys will be live from Indy, and I'm looking forward to it. I'm gonna make a lot of content for the channel. My guy Trevor Sekema over at PFF, and I'm just excited for all the many different content that we do have coming. I'm gonna try to see if I could sit down with some people as well and make a lot of things happen, man. But it's really going to be an awesome time. TWSN just launched our new website this past a few days ago. It's been really awesome. It's been a unique site as well. So make sure you guys tune in to all the work that people are doing at the TWSN website. I'm gonna see if I can get Evan to actually do a write-up this year on a draft board or some of his top players to keep an eye on. I think that would be pretty sick. But we've got a lot of content going. Daniel, I want to make sure that we get to some questions before we do head out of here. But we missed you guys too. We missed making content. We missed coming at you guys live. And now that the flu is out of my system, I think that will be full systems go. But Daniel?
Yeah, if you guys have any questions, make sure you guys drop them down below. But we have one that Benjamin Reeves and a couple other people are asking. Free agency, do you think that the Bengals have priced themselves out of the range of Eagles defensive tackle Milton Williams?
Well, I love that question first and foremost. And what I will say is free agency is genuinely a crapshoot. The best way I can describe NFL free agency, and this is not for our tenured folks who've watched free agency shows or who just follow the NFL a lot longer than you maybe see my ugly face on your screen. This is for the folks that maybe are new to the NFL. Here's what I'll explain. If you guys ever remember growing up and there was a big video game release, that's a bad analogy, but it was a big shoe release that was happening and people would bid, right? You think that the shoe is going to cost this amount of price. And then so when that happens, it's like, hey, you know what? I'm going to bid for that shoe. And then somebody comes in as a higher bidder. That's genuinely how free agency works. So Milton Williams can have all the projections right now as it stands from a contract standpoint, but until he actually hits the open market, we don't know. The Bengals in their mind already said that Germaine Pratt was not going to be in Cincinnati. And we saw what happened, right? The market was a lot lower. And all it takes is one team. And usually what happens is you get a team that is desperate, a team that is willing to overpay. And that's when you get the players that get approached about a contract restructure in 2 years. And then whether they agree to it or not, they get cut and then they're back on free agency market and they sign for a lot lower.
Michael Johnson.
That's sort of what happened with the inside linebacker unit, the off-ball linebacker spot, where people are like, so yeah, I don't know if I'm going to pay you $100 million because there was a guy named Corey Littleton and a guy, what's the guy's name from the Raiders, man? Nick Kowalski, who reset the linebacker market, and they basically hurt guys like a Germaine Pratt or what's the guy that went to the Bears that came from the Eagles? TJ Edwards. They hurt those guys when it came to the negotiation process because those guys signed for a ridiculous amount of money. Their talent was much higher than those guys, but people are like, chance. That's why I'm really excited to see what Nick Bolton gets in free agency, because traditionally the NFL said, hey, we are not getting scarred again by off-ball linebackers. We are not going to pay a ridiculous amount of money for a position that we don't believe is truly a premium. That's what the NFL has said, basically. That's what the NFL did with the running back market. But mark my words, this past year, right? The Eagles went out, they signed Saquon Barkley. Then we saw there was another team that went out and they signed another running back, Derrick Henry. I'm willing to bet there's going to be some team out there that's going to try to recreate that model this year and say, hey, you know what? Let's go out there and let's sign a top running back. It worked for the Eagles. It worked for the Ravens. Well, you don't have a Derrick Henry and you don't have a Saquon Barkley and you don't have a
Lamar Jackson.
And you don't have a Lamar Jackson and you don't have an Eagles offensive line. There's going to be some team out there. So I'm giving you a long-winded answer and I apologize here for this. But basically, you're going to get teams that go out there and they are not willing to reset the market for a player. But I believe that there's going to be some team, especially an up-and-coming team, a team that's young, a team that needs somebody that they think is entering into their prime, that is going to say, hey, you know what, Milton Williams, we know your projection is maybe $20 million annually or whatever the case may be, or maybe you get 45 million guaranteed. But you know what? We're going to make sure that no other team is going to sign you. We're going to come in with a crazy amount offer. We're going to give you 75 million guaranteed. And if you're Milton Williams, you run to the podium. You say, where do I sign? Fly me. Where am I flying to?
Tell me the Bears wouldn't pay 25 million,
Right.
5 million extra to get the trenches fixed. Tell me
Right.
the Falcons wouldn't do that for their D-line right now, right?
Right.
Especially when you got a quarterback on a rookie deal, when you
Right.
got wide receivers
Right.
on a rookie deal.
Like for me, I think Trey Smith, you look at some of the money that was going around when it came to guards play. I think Trey Smith could be one of the first guys to cash in free agency this year. I think you could see Trey Smith get $100 million deal in total. When you talk about guarantees and you talk about the salary and how it breaks down, I think you could really see that. And then that's where you get teams that are so pissed at other teams. They're like, why would you do that? Because now our guy that we're trying to re-sign, who has better stats, better numbers than the guy you just signed, is going to look at you and say, hey, we want that same contract that said player got. That's why free agency is a crapshoot. I genuinely do not know what Milton Williams is going to get. I was having this conversation with Trevor, and I said, Trev, do you think that Milton Williams is close to the player that we saw this year, or do we think that he's close to the player we saw the last couple of years? He said he thinks he's close to the player that we saw the last couple of years. He said, I think that potential is there, but what happens, right, when like we talked about, when you remove Jalen Carter out of the situation, or Jalen Davis out of the situation, or Vic Fangio out of the situation, how does that look? How does that look? And that's the biggest, because I've seen Milton Williams, his run game numbers were kind of lower this year, but it was weird. Every other year he graded so well there. So it's a weird situation. It's weird to see how free agency works, because you're always going to get that one team that's going to put their foot in their mouth and is going to say, damn, why do we do blah, 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 blah. I think the Bengals, if we're talking about contract projections for a guy like Milton Williams, the Bengals have an opportunity to sign him at the level that the contract is projected at. However, I do think that free agency is really about who the highest bidder is, and some team is always willing to go that extra mile than what realistically every other team is willing to go. Evan.
I'll tell you right now, between the cap jumping up, like I talked about, I expect probably some overpays, especially from teams like the Bears, like the Falcons, who are, hey, the Bears, we need competent players with a pulse to play in our trenches, and we have plenty of money to do it. And we have a lot of young guys on rookie contracts. Okay, cool. Falcons, hey, suddenly we can compete in our division and we feel pretty good, and we're turning to a rookie quarterback and we got some money. We'll go ahead and sign the last two pieces and we'll overpay for them because we got Jesse Bates on the defense and we got a bunch of good offensive guys. You got those kind of teams that are going to overpay for guys and be happy to. And for that reason, I believe that any of the top free agents, whether that's Milton Williams at D tackle, Trey Smith at guard, any of these guys, I don't think that the Bengals are going to be in on that. The only thing I think that would be the case for is Tee Higgins, who's their own, well, not even a free agent now. So I do not expect them to play in those waters. I expect probably for them to play in that kind of Alex Kappa, Ted Karras tier, which, I mean, it's very uninspired what they've done in that tier the last couple seasons. But if you remember correctly, after the draft, when they had DJ Reader and Von Bell and Mike Hilton, that was the time that they were playing in those waters for that free agency, and they nailed them. So they really just need to get some of these consistent veterans who they can rely on. They're going to take some swings in the draft, probably mid rounds for linebacker, guard, those positions that you can kind of more easily replace in rounds 3 and 4. But I just don't expect them to be playing in tier 1 and maybe even tier 2 of really any free agent position.
Yeah, we got a bunch more questions. Chad Walters said, and I saw this rumor going around, is there any rumors of Kyle Pitts to Cincy / would you guys entertain Kyle Pitts?
Can we just go ahead? I heard you say earlier, like, hey, like if you're looking to just avoid the stress this offseason, tune in here, ignore the big nationals. I want to add on to that, like second clause to that. Unfollow all the fucking MLF football and NFL rumors with the Z, with 3 Z's, with 5 Z's, all the Z's. Like, just unfollow all those fucking accounts, dude, because how many times did they say Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. Oh my God, he's talking to the Bengals. Oh, something might
Yeah,
happen.
remember I kept
And
coming
guess
out
what?
with
And you're like,
saying
dude, no,
it's not happening.
no one's talked to them. No phone call has been placed. No nothing. It's like he just tweeted the eyeball emoji one time because he was jerking his agent around trying to get a little bit extra money out of the Eagles at that point, right?
Yeah.
Like before he went to Detroit, that was where he ended up,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like I just unfollow those accounts, man. They're not true. Stick to your beat writers, stick to your national reporters for those kind of news. Stick to Malik, stick to the people who are actually giving you good quality content, and not the people who are like a cornerback soon.
Yeah.
Like just tweeting out shit. You know who you are. You fucking do it every single year. It's the most annoying shit ever.
Well, one thing I want to say really quickly is to Taylor Stout. I don't want to ignore your question because we're gonna get questions in here. I don't want to make sure it's properly discussed. He said, would love to drop in a call if possible. Bengals fan from New England talks about T to the Patriots. Hilarious. So I'm working on something currently very, very special. We're going to overhaul our entire interface and what we do. I actually do want to accept phone calls. I'm working on a 4-piece mic set to make sure that we can talk to y'all. I don't
Paul
even know if they
Feinbaum
created it.
action?
I've been literally looking for it. I've been doing a bunch of research. But we want to include you guys in on the conversation. Because when I say I wanted to bring a New York, New Jersey style media to Cincinnati, this is what I mean. It's going to probably get a little crazy. Somebody probably calling me a couple fucking idiots every now and again, but we'll probably do. We'll probably definitely.
I've been called worse by my father. It's fine.
Yeah, I've been called worse by my mom for sure. But we'll definitely have a couple of ideas for you guys to include you guys in the dialogue. When I say I love talking ball with y'all and disagreeing and having the conversation. When I did that thing last year where I had people on the show and we were talking, it really was the highlight of my day. I really, really do. A lot of y'all are extremely intelligent, right? We don't always share the same opinions. We don't always see eye to eye, but I think that's okay. That's about sports. That's what sports is about. For me, it was, do I want to get into politics or do I want to get into sports? Well, sports brings people together. Even though we disagree, you get the same type of vibe, same type of feeling. As long as we come to a common ground, or if we don't, it's fine. It's respect, mutual respect at the end of the day. So yes, we're working on something really, really cool for you. But Taylor Stout also had another question. Where is it at? He says, I don't even know if I could find it.
Was it the one about if
would you
trade
trade if the haul you got meant you had at the minimum a top 15 defense? Well, I mean, I think hindsight is always, you never know what it's going to look like until you do. But I will say this: we were talking about the numbers, and I'm a guy where I don't like to get caught up on players unless you are a premium position player, like a quarterback or something like that, or like a star receiver, like an absolute unicorn, and a guy like Jamar Chase.
Mm-hmm.
I was looking at it. I said, damn, you moved on. You traded, saved 16 million. What could you do with 16 million? But it's like, you start to think. Your mind starts to flutter a little.
But that's the difference, is he guaranteed it.
Yeah.
So we're playing in the land of guarantees now. So if you take the opposite side of the coin, maybe Trey Hendrickson, you take him and you say stick around and we'll try and get the top 15 with him. Maybe Trey gets hurt. Maybe someone else gets hurt.
Yeah.
But by that, you're basically guaranteeing, hey, everybody's healthy, or whoever gets hurt, somebody steps up and kills it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So like, as much as I love Trey, I'll take the guaranteed top 15 defense.
Absolutely.
Because that's ultimately the goal of even having Trey, right? So no matter if that's with or without Trey, the top 15 is the goal because the offense can carry.
And one thing I'll promise you guys as well, this will be the year that we do a live show somewhere. We will do a live show somewhere. I promise you that. We'll be in somebody's mom's backyard or something like that, and we'll be chowing down on some food, and we're gonna have a meetup. I'm also planning something big for the draft, but stay tuned for a lot of stuff. So.
Yeah, we got a couple more questions. Somebody was asking about the edge rusher position. Would you guys attack the edge in free agency? And one of the names they threw out was Azeez Ojulari, and that was from Travis Schwaller.
I still believe there's a world where Azeez Ojulari might want to try to play with his brother. I don't know why. I just get that vibe. But Azeez Ojulari, sure, he's fine. He had a good year this year.
I'm more of free agency is always fine. I think I'm more of a attacker to the draft kind of guy this year. I don't love the free agency edge class. There's some solid guys, but I think that the Bengals need, first and foremost, we have Myles Murphy, who is unfortunately still a little more of a TBD, does some good things, needs to work on others, and Trey's old. I think, I don't want to say old, but he's getting up there. There's some more questions. So I just think it makes more sense, kind of bringing in the youth, because you can bring in more of your needed pass rush specialist. You can bring in a well-rounded guy. You can do a little bit more of everything while still being, that's a expensive position. That just is. That's just the fact about it. So, me, obviously, I'm a draft guy. I'm probably will lean that way majority of the time. But I like the idea. I think it's more of a sustainable process to build through the draft. Obviously, if you can get Aziz on a cheaper deal than you would expect. But again, he's a guy, cap's going up, coming off a really good year. Is he really going to take an average to slightly above average deal? No, probably not. So that's why I kind of lean the draft over free agency when it comes to edge.
Dada D said something. And he said, if we could get Mike Green, man, oh man, I'm going to tell y'all something. I shouldn't say this because I hate to be biased or set in one. I am in love with Mike Green. I am in love with Mike Green. I've been in love with Mike Green for months, and I'll be honest with you. I'm going to have a hard time on these free agency shows selling me on a different player if he's sitting there, respectfully. And I think this year for the mock draft, we'll actually be using the TWSN draft simulator. Ooh. Hint, hint, hint. So we'll have some interesting dialogue, I'm sure, regarding that. But Mike Green is a guy that I'm head over heels for. I think he is the type of mold of a player. You want production? I don't give a fuck about the size. I don't care that you like 6'5", 6'6", 280, 260. Give me a guy that has the production. Give me a guy that you can look at and say, this is a guy. When I watch Mike Green, I think he is a 15+ sack. He can get upwards of 15+ sacks in the future. I'm not saying as a rookie he'll break out and do that,
tools,
but he's got the tools. And for me, I think there's a spot on the defensive line still for Myles Murphy, and I'll keep hammering the table. Oh, yeah. I still believe Myles Murphy personally. I think Myles Murphy has a future if he gets pushed inside. I really believe that. That's just my thoughts.
No,
Sorry.
for sure. No, you're good. You're good. And I'm excited to talk the draft. I'm with you. I think, and that's why just with the edge position, I struggle to see how they don't look at the edge. This is one of the largest and round one and round two. There hasn't been an edge group like this in the past 5 to 10 years. And there are guys, pass rushers that you can get. So I struggle to see how they're not looking at that and drafting one of these guys in round one or round two.
I just hope that people, like, one thing I really do, I think that we have a lot of and Blake Meek said that size, length, slash with some other things makes me worry he's not on their board. Yes, we know those things. The things might be some of the character concerns. That's not a thing. That's not. If Jermaine Burton was on their board, I can assure you that's not starting them away. I do believe the size, right? The size is something that they look at because they still go off of that old model. Well, the AFC North football, you have to be able to play football in the AFC North. By those metrics, Trey Hendrickson shouldn't be able to play football in the AFC North. So I do believe that the production could outweigh any preconceived notion that maybe they have on the edge position. When it comes to a lot of the guys here on this panel, let me just say this right now. I think we have some of the smartest minds. I respect the hell out of them. The work that Logan does in the offseason. Mm-hmm. Logan is probably the most in tune when it comes to these draft prospects. So I think that he does a fantastic job. So make sure you guys, if you're not, make sure you guys are following Logan on social media. Evan does a great job as well. Daniel is a nerd when it comes to this stuff. I'm just being honest with you. He literally will stay up until 3 a.m. just watching film on these guys. I'm like, dude, then you're tired in the morning. He's like, yeah, but let's watch this. Like literally, these are our conversations. Hey, let's turn on this dude. Let's watch the film on this guy. Like constant conversation. So when I say I think that these dudes are some of the best minds, and I like to fancy myself as a pretty good draft mind myself. I think that there are certain positions that I really, really excel at because I love ball. I've been around the game of ball my entire life. For me, edge rusher is a position that I really think I can look at guys and I can say, hey, you know what? This is a guy that has a lot of potential. It's the reason why I kind of pounded the table for the Bengals to draft Jared Verse if he was sitting there. I knew what Jared Verse was going to be. And I still think what he becomes in the future is going to be absolutely insane, nuts. And it's something we got Amarius Mims, so it's fine. It's cool. It's great. But I'm just saying, in a world in which Amarius Mims was not there, I would have ran to the podium and skipped twice for a guy like Jared Verse. Hear me out when I say this. Mike Green, in my opinion, is a game wrecker. He is a game wrecker. And if those issues that plagued him many, many years ago don't rear their ugly head in the National Football League, he will go on to be a very, very productive NFL player. I think there are certain guys that get a little bit too much love, which we'll talk about throughout this draft process. James Pierce Jr. is a guy that I like. I have my concerns. That's just me. I like him though. I think he's a good edge rusher. He, the one thing I will highlight about James Pierce Jr. that really, really excites me about him is he has a nonstop motor. He has a nonstop motor, and he constantly finds a way to get around the quarterback constantly. But I do struggle sometimes when I'm just like that is the mold, right? He is the mold that the Bengals usually fall in love with. But don't I hope the Bengals just don't find themselves pulling a Nolan Smith and being like, well, we have a type that we like. So we're going to be like, you know what? Forget all the rest of these players that could be staring us on the board. Don't pigeonhole yourself just because you have a standout edge rusher sitting there, but you know what? We got a defensive tackle. We've been trying to get a defensive tackle in here for a year. Do not pigeonhole yourself because you'll be kicking yourself in the future. Sorry, Daniel. Go ahead.
No, you're good. Yeah, I mean, we had a bunch of questions. So I think one other question people were talking about is with the Bengals scouting department, are you guys, and this is obviously a huge conversation, but are you guys concerned with the Bengals scouting department? Do you think that they got a bigger scouting department this offseason?
I'm always concerned with the Bengals scouting department. But go ahead, Logan. Sorry.
No, I was just kind of laughing about it. It's something we've talked about. I think everybody wants a bigger scouting department. But me and Dan were kind of talking about it before the show. Just specifically, I mean, we know we don't have a big scouting department. So I'm kind of interested, and what's probably something we'll never know. But internally, I'm just kind of interested to see how much influence Al Golden kind of has on the draft process coming from college. Not really. And I know he's been here before. It's not like something totally brand new to him, but just how much influence he's going to have on, draft prospects, draft say. Obviously, he's a defense coordinator. We knew Lou got a lot of his guys through the draft and, pounding the table for a lot of guys. I'm just kind of interested to see with the smaller scouting department, like how much are they really just going to trust a guy like Al Golden right away? I'm not saying he has no clue what he's doing. I'm just genuinely curious about a guy coming from the college ranks. How much trust are they just going to throw at him right away? Because obviously building the defense, you're the defensive coordinator. You obviously want to allow him to have his guys in there. But I'm just kind of interested to see how that whole thing plays out. And that's just kind of, it gets amplified when you have such a small scouting department as we all do. We all want it to be bigger, but it's just something that's probably never.
I believe that they're going to give Al Golden the autonomy, at least with the first pick. I believe that. I believe that wholeheartedly. I think that he is going to have the ability to draft the guy that he wants. Someone said, Benjamin Rivers, my guy, appreciate you. I saw your TikTok too, man. You're awesome. He says, would you take Shamar Stewart at 17?
Depends who's there.
You said it depends.
Not really, actually.
I'm good. I'm good off of him. I'm good off him personally.
He's one that they typically would love, I feel like. And that the conversation with him is going to be, this dude could play DT. Like, he's massive. The number one thing that I'm struggling with, the dude, his production was a net zero.
Yes.
And that's what I'm not really in the business of getting a guy right now that I say, oh, well, he looked good.
You're not trying to hear potential.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I'm just being honest.
And he's got the physical tools to do it. And he's one I do think that they would be like, man, we can put him at 3 tech. We can put him at the outside.
Do you like him, Logan?
You
seem a little conflicted over there.
I'm super conflicted.
Okay.
I'm super conflicted.
This is draft Logan. Everybody, this is draft Logan. Let's talk to draft Logan.
Man,
now.
it's super conflicted because he's got the athleticism, he's got the size, he's got good pressure, like amount of hurries. He does a lot of things well, but it's just so hard to ignore the literal zero production a player has. I think when I'm looking at it through a Bengals lens, he falls down a little more than typical because we need that instant production. We need someone who can go out there and produce right away. There's so many arguments to be made about Shamar Stewart's ceiling and how high it is, and I don't think anybody will really argue the ceiling, but it's just how we're going to get there. How's he going to be used? Like, there's just so many questions about the player, and some teams don't really care about that, But when there's just a lot of questions and like there's no clear fits, there's no clear paths, like it's just harder to deal with than your Mike Greens, even your Michael Williams, your Nick Scorns, the guys that have defined roles that have better production but still have the athleticism. Like, he could be a super, super good NFL player. He's got so many qualities. He's probably going to test like an absolute freak at the combine. A lot of people comp him to the Trayvon Walker hype, and I think that's relatively fair, but he's just a disruptor. And as soon as if he ever decides to turn his pressure numbers into sacks, he will be amazing. But that's something we have never seen him do.
There's a guy that everybody is. Oh, I might get a lot of heat for this. Man, Daniel knows how I feel already. There's a guy that everybody's talking about. And by the way, we got over 180 people watching us live. If you guys could just give this video, like, and subscribe. We only got 51 likes. If you guys give us a like on this video and subscribe to the channel. And I hope I don't get a lot of heat for this, but there's a guy that I'm just not seeing it with that everybody else, Kenneth Grant, personally. I see people trying to fit him at 17 if he's there. And guys, I'm be honest with you. And if you think I'm an idiot, you think I'm wrong, please tell me. I just don't see it with him. I think that if he doesn't win on his initial move, I think that, we always talk about potential. I think he's a monster in the run games or stopping the run. But if he doesn't win on that initial pass rush move, he leaves a lot to be desired off there. He gets moved off his spot in pass rush sets. And I personally am not a Kenneth Grant guy. That's just my thoughts.
No, I think Kenneth Grant, where I'm literally on the pendulum with him. I started out as if he is the guy for the Bengals. He leaves a lot to be desired in the pass rush. And that's, for me, you are banking on his skills and his raw athleticism. This dude is a freak. I think this dude is going to test like a freak, but he had a lot of time at Michigan to show his pass rush. And for me, there was only one game that he really did that. And this is the one thing I think that could be good, was in the biggest game of the year against Ohio State. His pass rush moves were on a whole nother level, but you're banking on potential with Kenneth Grant. So I think at number 17 overall, I do agree that there's going to be a lot of other talent on the board.
I just hate when we fall in love with prospects, or we like say, not us, I'm just saying this just in general, where there's like, hey, we have a need here. Let's push this guy up aboard, because if it comes down to him and Walter Nolan, I'm taking Walter Nolan all day. Walter Nolan's an absolute dog. I'm good on that. But when I look at it, I say, hey, if you give me a board, right? And you say, hey, Mike Green's sitting here, James Pierce Jr. is sitting here, then you got Walter Nolan and you got Kenneth Grant. I'm taking Mike Green.
Grant's last.
Yeah.
By the way, on that.
I'll like, trade back.
I like Grant, and it's different, but your concerns are totally valid, and I agree with that. But I think it's, when you're looking, first off, he's ginormous. That's first things first. He's going to test very well, which is going to attract a lot of people. Not a lot of guys that big move as well as he does, and that's just going to attract a lot of teams. But the thing with Grant, he is a great run defender. He does a lot of things well. His pass rush does leave some to be desired, but when he wins, he doesn't have too many counters. That is by far his biggest thing to work on at the next level. But it's a little different than edge. If I can get a DT that's going to win instantly 3 times a game, I'll fucking take that every day of the week.
Yeah.
There's
the passion there.
And that's the thing.
There's the passion there.
That's just the thing about it. I want my defensive tackle to be a better pass rusher, but if I know he's going to just win super quick immediately a few times a game, I don't want to say that's enough, because obviously you want it more times than not, but it's almost enough if he can translate into sacks, or it obviously leaves some to be desired. But I think that comparing him to Shamar Stewart, I think the upside's a little easier to see for him, to me, than it is a guy like Shamar Stewart.
So somebody asked me a question on Tyler Booker. I love Tyler Booker. I'm not just saying that as an Alabama fan. I think that he's his technique is extremely impressive. I think Tyler Booker is going to be an immediate starter for whoever drafts him. I think that the Bengals, I'd like to hope that they figure out the guard spot. You still need to draft the guard for the future. I just think his game is clean. I know, even though people are a fan of Tate Ratledge, I just think that if you're comparing the two people's Tyler Booker and Tate Ratledge game, I think that Tyler Booker is just a completely more pro ready prospect. And one thing I will use when it comes to a Tyler Booker is you turn on the tape and you watch his film. He's consistent. He's consistent. You know what you're getting. Stout in the pass protection game, good in the run game. I think he could get even more better in the run game, honestly. But I do like Tyler Booker. I just think that the Bengals are going to have to pick up the litter. Somebody said feelings on Malachi Starks. I'll let the group tell that, but I did hear someone talk about Xavier Watts, and I don't want to bore people with draft talk right now, because there's going to be a lot of that on the channel this upcoming week. But let's not try to fit Xavier Watts at 17, respectfully. I'm just going to say that. Let's just not try to push that, because if it wasn't Al Golden as the defensive coordinator, and it wasn't Al Golden coming from Notre Dame, I do not think that we'd be talking about Xavier Watts at 17, respectfully.
Wouldn't.
Just my thoughts. But I do like Xavier Watts. I do think his hips are a little tight, personally, but I do think that he has his ability to track the ball is second to none. He's extremely, extremely impressive, and I think that somebody is going to get an absolute steal later in the draft. If he falls, if he's there in the second round when the Bengals pick, I think that's a discussion to have. But I wouldn't try to force Xavier Watts to the Bengals all because of the Al Golden tie at 17. Personally, just my thoughts.
No, for sure. And I'm with you. I think that, and when people are asking about Booker, Booker's a guy, he can play left or right. He played left, I believe, most of the time, but he also, I believe, started his career as a right guard. First round remains to be seen. I think that a team's going to fall in love with him. 17 might be a little rich for Booker. And especially, and that's another question real quick. I don't know, once again, how much we wanted to keep diving into this. But people are asking about two guys, Tyler Warren. Any chance that the Bengals look to Tyler Warren at 17 / what's your guys' thoughts on him?
I love Tyler Warren.
I just don't think so. I think they have too many needs at too many other positions to really take a swing that hard on a tight end.
I mean, I don't think it's a 0. I don't think it's very high. I think he's just a really good player. I think he does a lot of things well that the Bengals will like. The position of the need of it isn't the biggest thing in the world, which is why it's just probably not going to happen. But he's a fantastic player. I'm really high on him in general. I don't even think he'll be there at 17. But he's just a great player. I just don't think it's as much as I want the Bengals to really consider it if he was there. The board would have to be, all the edges would have to be gone. Yeah, all the edges would have to be gone, essentially. And most of the good GTs would have to be gone for them to really even consider it.
So, Logan, I have a question for you. And someone also posed this question as well. And this is a long show, but we haven't been on your television screens in 2 weeks. Someone said, what are your thoughts on Derek Harmon? I think they're asking the entire panel. But I'll be honest with you, I'm not a huge fan. I think it's very raw. And I think he has the potential to be good. But I mean,
DT is very tricky because as soon as you kind of go into that territory of not really being a 3-down player, your value immediately takes a pretty large hit. And I think that's the worry with Derek Harmon. He's in my big board that I released today for the Bengals. He's in there and he's decently high, but because he fits what the Bengals need at that position. They need somebody who can rush the passer, and he does that with the best of them at the defensive tackle position. And he's got bigger size than some of the guys that have the slightly better numbers or numbers around him. He's much bigger than them, but he doesn't play the run nearly as well as you would like for a guy his size. He's kind of, I don't know, he's climbing up pretty high. And when you're considering him at 17, it starts to get like, okay, it's probably just too rich. In general, I'm a fan of Derek Harmon in round 2, in the back end of the first. If you're really, really a team that is complete, you're looking for that last piece. He's going to be a phenomenal pass rusher in the league. But, I would say we talked about him earlier. He's going to play a similar role this year to what Milton Williams played. He's probably not going to play too much against a run. He's going to be great against a pass. What are you going to get out of him? Is he going to be a guy that flashes for a year or two and then dies down? I don't know. But regardless, the pass rushing juice is there. It's definitely there. But again, the question of being a 3-down player at defensive tackle, as soon as that question comes up, you're probably going to fall on a lot of teams' boards. And I think that's the worry with him.
Yeah, we have a couple more. Scott Bryant said, Goodberry liked Deion Walker from Kentucky. What about him at 17? I just want to have the conversation, Deion Walker. Round 1, and I think this just goes to the point of defensive tackle too. Defensive tackle, I feel like there's a lot of guys you could get in round 2 or round 3. And I think that Deion Walker is and should be comped to the Tavondre Sweat of last year, in the same token that I think that's what you want, right? You want to bring him in because the dude is 6'6" and 340 pounds. My concern with him, I'm not considering him in round 1. That's just me. I think that it is way too rich for a guy whose production took in my opinion, last year's film was much better than this year's film. And this year he worked on his conditioning. This year he was a 3-down player for them. But he's a situational guy for me right now. And I think that I'm not considering him at 17. I don't know what your thoughts are.
No,
but
there's no way I would take him at 17. I mean, I know that the hype, I don't really necessarily say it got there. There's been some people that, the upside again is clearly there with the guy. He's going to test crazy well at the combine. I'm sure he's going to end up probably going top 50-ish, maybe a little later, depending on exactly how well he tests. But upside is unbelievable. Some of the flashes have been unbelievable, but then he looks completely lost half the time too. His conditioning was an issue in years prior. He Credit to him. Did a fantastic job of working on that and took some major strides in that this year. But we also saw the overall production decrease as well. Maybe that's from playing more, whatever. But fun player. Really high upside, really low floor. Not an option at 17.
All right, I think that's all the time that we got here for today. We kind of went deep. We went deep down the rabbit hole. As Kendrick Lamar, it gets deep. But I'm happy that we were able to talk everything. I mean, the questions are flowing in. Jahad Barron, so I'm loving it. I'm loving the draft talk. Next week is going to be dedicated to draft talk. If you hate the NFL draft, this is probably not the week you want to watch this channel because we have so much content coming. I'm going to have content with me and Trevor, me and my guy Dame Parsons of Bleacher Report. Evan and Logan are going to be making the trip down to Indy for State of the Jungle on Wednesday, and I'm looking forward to having and Jimmy's making the trip down too. But I'm looking forward to having the discussion with all of y'all, talking all about the prospects, the different prospects the Bengals talk to. If you guys want to make sure you follow along with everything that we've got going on, make sure you guys follow TWSN on Twitter. But you follow, we're gonna have a live feed going on as well from live from Indy on our website twsn.net as well to keep up with all fantastic stories that we've got coming out as well. We greatly appreciate y'all for tuning in. If you like more video content like this, give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications so you guys never miss when we go live for an episode of State of the Jungle. But until next time, Hoo day.